August 29, 1988, 6:05 a.m., Flatlands, Brooklyn. Wilfred Willie Boy Johnson stepped out of his house on Royce Street and began walking toward his car, parked at the curb 15 feet away. He was dressed for work, carrying his lunch, thinking about the ordinary Monday ahead of him. Two men emerged from behind parked vehicles and opened fire with .380 caliber automatic handguns. 19 rounds in rapid succession, the sound echoing through the quiet residential street like fireworks. Willie Boy was hit once in each thigh, twice in the back, and at least 6 times in the head. He tried to run, managed 3 or 4 steps, then collapsed face down on the pavement. The shooters dropped jack-like spikes on the street to prevent police pursuit, then disappeared into a waiting car. Willie Boy's wife ran from the house screaming, cradled her husband's head in her lap, but he was already dead. Police arrived to find shell casings scattered across the street, blood pooling around the body, and neighbors who'd heard the gunfire but seen nothing useful. What those neighbors didn't know was that Wilfred Johnson had been living on borrowed time for 3 years, ever since a federal prosecutor publicly revealed that he'd been an FBI informant since 1966, feeding information about John Gotti and the Gambino crime family to federal agents for 19 years. Willie Boy had betrayed his best friend, provided evidence that led to Gotti's arrest for murder, helped build narcotics cases against Gambino members, and given the FBI intelligence on dozens of mob killings. He'd done all of this while working alongside Gotti, serving as his driver and bodyguard, participating in crimes, and maintaining the appearance of absolute loyalty. And when his secret was exposed, Willie Boy made a decision that sealed his fate. He refused to enter witness protection and refused to testify against Gotti, choosing instead to stay in Brooklyn, live in his house, and pretend that his decades of betrayal could somehow be forgiven or forgotten. Wilfred Johnson was born on September 29, 1935, in Canarsie, Brooklyn, one of 5 children in a family marked by poverty, violence, and dysfunction. His father was part Native American, Cherokee heritage, and worked as a construction iron worker when he worked at all. But Willie Boy's father was also an abusive alcoholic who spent entire paychecks on liquor and beat his wife and children regularly. His mother was Italian American, and she periodically abandoned the family, leaving for days or weeks before returning, creating an unstable home environment where Willie Boy learned early that loyalty and family bonds were conditional and fragile. Willie Boy grew up in Red Hook, Brooklyn, where organized crime was part of the neighborhood's economic and social structure. Italian mobsters controlled rackets, collected tribute from businesses, and provided employment, legal and illegal, to young men willing to work for them. Willie Boy was known on the streets as Indian or half-breed because of his mixed heritage, nicknames that marked him as an outsider, even in a neighborhood of outsiders. He started his criminal career at age 9, arrested for stealing money from a cash register. By his teens, he was running with street gangs, committing robberies, and building a reputation for toughness and willingness to use violence. In 1957, at age 22, Willie Boy Johnson met John Gotti for the first time. Gotti was 17, a high school dropout running with the Fulton Rockaway Boys street gang in East New York. Despite the 5-year age difference, the two formed a friendship based on mutual criminal interests and complementary skills. Gotti was charismatic, ambitious, and smart about mob politics. Willie Boy was physically imposing, stocky, over 200 pounds, size 21 neck, with a gravel voice that sounded like cement mixing. One FBI agent later described him this way: "You didn't want to meet Willie Boy on the street, and if you met him, you'd better have backup ammunition because 6 bullets were not going to stop this guy. He was the type who, if he got shot, would try to rip the bullets out of his own chest and then get really pissed off." When Gotti joined the Gambino family in the early 1960s and began working for Carmine Fatico's crew at the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club in Ozone Park, Willie Boy came with him. Johnson became known as the Terminator because of his effectiveness as an enforcer and his willingness to handle violent work. He served as Gotti's driver, bodyguard, and occasionally as muscle when collections needed to be enforced or problems needed to be solved physically. Willie Boy earned money for the crew and proved himself reliable in ways that mattered to organized crime. He could keep his mouth shut, he followed orders without questioning them, and he was loyal to Gotti personally. But Willie Boy had a fundamental problem that would limit his advancement within the Gambino family. He could never become a made member. Mafia rules required that both parents be of Italian heritage, and Willie Boy's father was Native American. This meant that regardless of how much money he earned, how many crimes he committed, or how loyal he proved himself, Willie Boy would always be an associate. Young Jew, inferior status compared to made members who might have joined the family yesterday. He would attend meetings and take orders from men he'd known for decades, men who treated him like a servant rather than an equal. This permanent second-class status created resentment that Willie Boy occasionally expressed to people he trusted. He complained that Fatico and Gotti treated him like a gopher, that they made him handle swag, stolen goods, while made members got the profitable positions. The friendship with Gotti was real, but it was also unequal. Gotti was rising through Gambino family ranks, becoming a made member in 1977 and eventually a captain with his own crew. Willie Boy remained an associate, earning but never advancing, respected for his toughness, but never achieving the status he believed he deserved. In 1966, Willie Boy Johnson was arrested and convicted of armed robbery. He was sentenced to prison, leaving behind a wife and 2 infant children. Mob protocol dictated that when a crew member went to prison, the capo took care of his family, providing money, making sure the wife and kids didn't suffer financially. Carmine Fatico promised to support Willie Boy's family while he was inside, but Fatico broke that promise. Willie Boy's wife received no money from the crew. She was forced to go on welfare to feed their children, struggling alone while her husband served time for crimes committed on behalf of the Gambino family. This betrayal transformed Willie Boy's perspective on the mob's code of honor and loyalty. He'd believed that the family took care of its own. That suffering for the organization meant the organization would reciprocate. Instead, he learned that loyalty flowed upward but rarely downward, that men like Fatico would make promises and break them without consequence, and that being an associate rather than a made member meant his family's welfare mattered less than a made member's would. When Willie Boy was released from prison in 1967, FBI agents approached him about becoming an informant. He was reluctant initially, understanding that informing carried a death sentence if discovered, but the FBI offered to drop some pending counterfeiting charges, and more importantly, Willie Boy wanted payback for what the Gambino family had done to his wife and children. He agreed to cooperate, becoming FBI Informant BQ5558-TE. The TE stood for Top Echelon, indicating he was a high-value source. The BQ meant Brooklyn, Queens. His code name was Wahoo, a reference to his Native American heritage. For the next 19 years, from 1966 to 1985, Willie Boy Johnson provided information to the FBI while continuing to work for John Gotti and the Gambino family. His FBI handler was Special Agent Martin Boland, who quickly recognized Johnson's value. Unlike many informants who exaggerated or fabricated information to seem more important, Willie Boy provided accurate, verifiable intelligence that led to arrests and convictions. He helped solve major hijackings, provided details on murders, revealed internal Gambino family politics, and gave the FBI insights into how the organization operated. But Willie Boy had a curious relationship with providing information about John Gotti specifically. He was careful when discussing his friend, often refusing to elaborate beyond occasional hints. He told Agent Boland at one point, "Sometimes I love him and sometimes I hate him." Willie Boy complained about Gotti's gambling addiction, mentioning that Gotti would bet up to $100,000 a week and create financial problems for himself and the crew, but he resisted giving information that would directly endanger Gotti, maintaining some loyalty even while betraying the the broader organization. One of the most significant pieces of information Willie Boy provided came in May 1973, after John Gotti, Angelo Ruggiero, and Ralph Gallione murdered James McBratney in a Staten Island bar. McBratney was the Irish gangster who'd kidnapped and killed Carlo Gambino's nephew, and Gotti had volunteered to kill him. The hit was successful but messy. Gotti and his partners shot McBratney in a crowded bar with dozens of witnesses. Police quickly identified Ruggiero and Gallione from witness descriptions, but the third killer's identity remained unknown. Willie Boy heard Gotti bragging about the McBratney killing and provided that information to the FBI, who passed it to the New York City Police Department. This led to Gotti's arrest and conviction for attempted manslaughter. Gotti served 2 years at Greenhaven Correctional Facility, and ironically, Willie Boy Johnson was also imprisoned there at the same time, serving a sentence for armed robbery. The two friends did time together, Gotti never knowing that Willie Boy was the reason he'd been identified and arrested. Willie Boy also provided crucial information for the FBI's investigation into Angelo Ruggiero's heroin trafficking operation. He gave agents details about the narcotics ring, identified Gene Gotti and John Carnelia as participants, and provided intelligence that helped justify FBI wiretaps on Ruggiero's home. The resulting evidence led to arrests in 1983 and eventually to convictions that sent Gene Gotti and Carnelia to prison for 50 years each. Throughout his informant career, Willie Boy continued committing crimes alongside the people he was informing on. FBI agent Boland noted the difficulty of handling an informant who remained criminally active. Case agent had handled this informant single-handedly, has to contend with the informant being arrested for counterfeiting, receiving, stolen property, and armed robbery. Willie Boy was valuable enough that the FBI tolerated his criminal activity, understanding that maintaining credibility within the Gambino family required continuing to participate in their operations. Willie Boy received minimal financial compensation from the FBI, no regular payments for information. He once borrowed $100 from Agent Boland as an emergency personal loan, which he promptly repaid, refusing to pay interest. But he did profit indirectly. His information solved several major hijackings, and in cases where insurance companies offered rewards for recovery of stolen goods, the FBI provided confidential affidavits confirming that Johnson was responsible for the recoveries. Willie Boy collected these rewards, in one case receiving $30,000 for a large shipment recovery. In March 1985, Willie Boy Johnson's 19-year career as an informant came to an abrupt and public end. Federal prosecutor Diane Giacalone was preparing a RICO case against John Gotti, Gene Gotti, and several other Gambino family members. The case was built partially on information Willie Boy had provided over the years. FBI agents Thomas Shear and James Kostler tried to protect their informant's identity, but Giacalone overruled them. On March 18, 1985, she met with FBI agents and demanded they turn over the source Wahoo files. Giacalone's plan was to expose Willie Boy publicly in court, hoping that fear of Gotti's retribution would force him to testify for the prosecution and enter witness protection. On March 25, 1985, Johnson's name appeared on the indictment alongside Gotti and the other defendants. The source Wahoo FBI files were provided to defense attorneys as discovery material, revealing in detail Willie Boy's 19 years of cooperation with federal agents. Willie Boy's FBI handler, Agent Abbott, informed him what was about to happen. Willie Boy's response was immediate and terrified. "I will be killed. My family will be slaughtered." Abbott advised him to take a plea deal, testify against Gotti, and enter the witness protection program, where he and his family could be relocated with new identities. But Willie Boy refused. He denied being an informant despite overwhelming documentary evidence. He refused to testify. He refused witness protection. And he chose to stay in Brooklyn, living in the same house, maintaining his routine, as if denial could somehow undo 19 years of betrayal. The trial began in late 1986. Willie Boy sat at the defense table alongside John Gotti and the other defendants, publicly denying his informant status, while everyone in the courtroom, Prosecutors, defense attorneys, FBI agents, and the defendants themselves knew the truth from the files Giacalone had disclosed. The trial became a disaster for the prosecution. Witnesses developed memory problems. Jury tampering was suspected. And on March 13, 1987, John Gotti and all co-defendants, including Willie Boy Johnson, were acquitted on all charges. Gotti walked out of federal court that day, blowing kisses toward the building and celebrating his victory. Willie Boy walked out too, technically a free man, but everyone understood his situation. He'd been exposed as a 19-year FBI informant. He'd betrayed Gotti specifically by providing information that led to the McBratney arrest. He'd helped build narcotics cases against Gene Gotti and others, and he'd refused to enter witness protection, choosing instead to remain in reach of the people he'd betrayed. For 18 months after the acquittal, Willie Boy Johnson lived in limbo. He stayed in his Flatlands house, went about his daily routine, and apparently believed or pretended to believe that his friendship with Gotti might protect him. John Gotti had reasons to delay the execution. First, killing Willie Boy immediately after the trial would be obvious retaliation that would attract FBI attention. Second, Gotti may have felt genuine conflict about ordering the death of a longtime friend who'd refused to testify despite having opportunities to do so. But pressure mounted on Gotti to act. Willie Boy had apparently continued providing information to authorities even after his exposure, including details about Alphonse Persico, son of imprisoned Colombo boss Carmine Persico. Alphonse reportedly challenged the Gambino family by asking, "What are you waiting for?" The implication was clear. Allowing an exposed informant to live made Gotti look weak and encouraged others to cooperate with law enforcement. In discussions with Sammy Gravano about planning Willie Boy's murder, Gotti expressed concern that the hit team might fail and force Johnson into government protection where he could provide even more damaging testimony. Gotti wanted the killing done professionally, with no possibility of Willie Boy surviving or escaping. The contract was given to Thomas "Tommy Karate" Patera and Vincent Kojak Giattino, hitmen from the Bonanno crime family. Using Bonanno rather than Gambino killers provided deniability. If caught, the shooters had no direct connection to Gotti. Patera was a particularly dangerous choice. He was a martial arts expert who'd trained in Japan, a sadistic killer suspected of 30 murders, known for dismembering victims and keeping body parts as trophies. On the morning of August 29, 1988, Patera and Giattino positioned themselves near Willie Boy's house before dawn. They waited for him to emerge for work, knowing his routine, having surveilled his movements for days or weeks. At 6:05 a.m., as Willie Boy walked from his front door toward his car parked at the curb, the two gunmen opened fire simultaneously. 19 rounds were fired in approximately 10 seconds. Willie Boy was hit in both thighs, preventing him from running. He was hit twice in the back as he tried to move away from the shooters, and he was hit at least 6 times in the head, execution-style shots designed to ensure death. Willie Boy collapsed on Roy Street, bleeding massively, unconscious before he hit the pavement. His wife heard the gunfire and ran outside screaming. She found her husband face down in a spreading pool of blood, his body riddled with bullets, his head shattered by close-range shots. She cradled him, calling his name, but Willie Boy Johnson, FBI informant, Wahoo, John Gotti's longtime friend and driver, the man who'd betrayed the Gambino family for 19 years while pretending absolute loyalty, was dead. The hit team dropped jack-like spikes on the street as they fled, metal objects designed to puncture tires and prevent police pursuit. They escaped in a waiting vehicle, disappearing into Brooklyn's early morning traffic. Police arrived within minutes to find Willie Boy's body, 19 shell casings from .380 caliber weapons, and a widow who couldn't or wouldn't provide useful information about who might have wanted her husband dead. The investigation was perfunctory. Everyone Everyone involved, FBI, NYPD federal prosecutors, knew exactly why Willie Boy Johnson had been killed and had reasonable suspicions about who'd ordered it, but proving it was impossible. No witnesses came forward. No physical evidence connected anyone to the killing. The hit had been professional, clean, and executed with the understanding that Willie Boy's status as an exposed informant meant his murder would generate minimal investigative pressure. In 1992, 4 years after the killing, Bonanno hitman Thomas Patera and Vincent Giattino were indicted for Willie Boy Johnson's murder along with several other killings. The charges stemmed from testimony provided by Frank Gangi, a member of Patera's crew who'd decided to cooperate with prosecutors. At trial, Giattino was convicted of the Johnson murder, but Patera was acquitted, the jury apparently believing that while he'd committed other murders, the evidence for the Johnson killing specifically was insufficient for conviction. Beyond reasonable doubt, Patera was convicted of 6 other murders and sentenced to life in prison, where he remains today. Giattino received a lengthy sentence for his role in the Johnson killing, but John Gotti, who almost certainly ordered or approved the hit, was never charged in connection with Willie Boy's death. By the time Patera and Giattino were prosecuted, Gotti was already serving a life sentence for other crimes, making additional charges pointless. The story of Willie Boy Johnson reveals fundamental truths about organized crime's code of loyalty and the impossible position of long-term FBI informants who remain embedded in criminal organizations. Willie Boy spent 19 years betraying people he worked alongside daily, providing information that destroyed lives and sent men to prison for decades. He did this while maintaining friendships, participating in crimes, and presenting himself as loyal to the same organization he was helping federal agents dismantle. His motivation was complex. It began with legitimate grievance. Carmine Fatico's broken promise to support his family while he was in prison demonstrated that mob loyalty was conditional and self-serving. But it evolved into something more complicated. Willie Boy's relationship with Gotti was genuinely conflicted. He told his FBI handler, "Sometimes I love him and sometimes I hate him," capturing the ambivalence of someone who felt both friendship and resentment toward the same person. Willie Boy's decision to refuse witness protection after being exposed seems inexplicable from a rational perspective. He knew the rules. Informants who were discovered were killed. He'd helped provide information that led to murders of other informants. He understood exactly what would happen to him if he stayed in Brooklyn. Yet he chose to remain, perhaps believing his friendship with Gotti would protect him, perhaps too attached to his neighborhood and his life to start over somewhere else, perhaps accepting that death was inevitable and preferring to face it on familiar streets rather than live in hiding. His widow was left alone, just as she'd been left alone when Fatico broke his promise in 1966. The broken promise that had turned Willie Boy into an informant came full circle. His wife suffered for his choices, abandoned by both the mob and the FBI. Her husband's body riddled with bullets on a Brooklyn street, while neighbors watched from behind curtains and said nothing to police. For John Gotti, ordering Willie Boy's murder must have been both necessary and painful. Gotti had known Willie Boy for 31 years, since 1957 when they were young criminals building reputations in Brooklyn. They'd committed crimes together, done prison time together, built careers in the Gambino family side by side. But Willie Boy's betrayal was absolute. 19 years of informing, directly leading to Gotti's arrest, helping build cases against Gene Gotti and others. Friendship couldn't survive that level of betrayal, especially when allowing an informant to live would be interpreted as weakness by other mobsters. The murder of Willie Boy Johnson on August 29, 1988, closed a chapter in John Gotti's life that had begun 3 decades earlier. It eliminated a longtime friend who'd become a threat, sent a message to other potential informants about the consequences of cooperation, and demonstrated that Gotti was willing to kill anyone, regardless of history or personal feelings, who betrayed the organization. 4 years later, in 1992, John Gotti would be convicted and sentenced to life in prison, largely because Sammy "the Bull" Gravano Gotti's underboss and closest advisor, decided to cooperate with federal prosecutors and testify against him. Gambino's betrayal mirrored Willie Boy's in many ways. Years of loyalty followed by cooperation with law enforcement when facing long prison sentences. The difference was that Gambino entered witness protection and lived, while Willie Boy refused protection and died on a Brooklyn street with 19 bullets in his body. Willie Boy Johnson's story is a tragedy of conflicted loyalty, broken promises, and the inevitable consequences of trying to serve two masters in a world where betrayal carries a death sentence. He spent 19 years walking a tightrope between the FBI and the Gambino family, maintaining friendships while destroying the people he pretended to be loyal to. And when his secret was revealed, he made a final choice that reflected either courage or denial. He stayed in Brooklyn, lived his life openly, and waited for the bullets he knew were coming. On August 29, 1988, at 6:05 in the morning, those bullets arrived. 19 rounds in 10 seconds ended Wilfred "Willie Boy" Johnson's life and closed a chapter in organized crime history about friendship, betrayal, and the price both exact from the people caught between them.